Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on Break the Cypher, or should I say, thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Mike Grady. I am solo today. It is November 11th, Veterans Day, and I'm sitting here having a beer with you. And I'd like to toast all of our veterans out there and say thank you for your service. Wouldn't be here without you guys. We appreciate you. We love you. And, we hope you're having a nice day. Cheers. All right. So today, since I'm solo, I decided maybe we'll break our own cipher today. Okay. We'll take a break from the news. We'll take a break from the regulations and the taxes and the this and the that. All right. And we're going to go into a little bit of Break the Cypher story time. Right. And I'm gonna go in and tell you a little something about 2009, if that's all right with you. And so, without further ado, here I go. So, a lot of people tend to ask me about how we got started as a business, and it's a really interesting story. It goes all the way back to 2009. It started out, we were actually, my business partner, Nolan, and we were going down to Durango, Colorado, because we made appointments to get our medical marijuana cards, which was like, holy shit, we can get our medical marijuana cards. And so we called, we made an appointment with the doctor. The doctors back then, each of these dispensaries that were active, they flew doctors in to the dispensary, and they had a special day where it was like doctor day. And so there would be advertisements like, we're taking appointments on this day or that day. And you would call in, you'd schedule your appointment, you'd bring your medical paperwork, and you would meet with this doctor in one of the back rooms of the dispensary. Really interesting. I remember feeling quite overwhelmed, just like on the phone with the receptionist. She's like, whatever, Durango Organics or whatever it was at the time, Durango Wellness. And I'm like, yeah, so, I want to schedule an appointment with your doctor. I got some problems, And she's like, oh, well, tell me about, like, what do you got going on? And so the conversation went on. Eventually, we finished. I got the appointment. I called Nolan. I'm like, dude, I got an appointment to go get my weed license in Durango. And so my buddy Nolan calls up, schedules his appointment. We schedule time to go down there right before we're supposed to be leaving for Fish Festival 8, all right, in California. And so we get this done before we go there, and we, have our appointments. You come out of your appointment and you have temporary paperwork. A lot of you out there remember this process from the early days. And so then you come out with your temporary paperwork, and you can buy weed. And it came in these little jars. They were like brown with like prescription pill bottle lids. And yeah, I feel like I got Blowfish, I got Bubba Kush, and I can't remember the last one. I still have the jars. I saved them because they were kind of like milestone to me. It's like, damn, legal weed. Here we go. And so, interestingly enough, we left there. I mean, it was not cheap. I think it was like $120 a quarter or something like that, with the tax and stuff, but we didn't really care. We were like, oh my God, we just bought medical grade marijuana. Holy shit. And, we were like the happiest people in the world driving out of there. We were so excited, had our bottles of weed, and had these plans to go off to fish, which was excellent. And it actually brings me to the next part of my story, but I'm going to take Take a little high life breaker. Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice. All right, so the next part of the story is we go to Fish Festival 8. This is my favorite part of the story. So we go to Fish Festival 8. Needless to say, for any of you fish fans out there, it was a party. I had one of the best times of my life at Fish Festival 8. 4 days of amazing music and campgrounds and all the right people and all the right things, and it was just awesome. By day 4 of Fish Festival, by the time that ended, you start feeling like, what am I going to do with my life when I get home? I feel like a lot of us have had that feeling after leaving a 4-day festival. And so yeah, we're on the way home after having this amazing time. And, some of us are kind of assed out in the car. Some of us are awake, and one of us is driving, obviously, and we're little chit chats are happening along the way. There was a lot of talk about this big art project that we wanted to do when we got back home. It was called the Mashed Potato Project, which I think we're still working on and we just don't realize it. But it's like a big art cooperative kind of community where all boats rise with the tide and stuff. And it was a very big, grandiose view. And so really, we could be working on it still. We have no idea, but it was that big and it was just ground shattering. And somewhere along the line on the way home, we're talking about the medical marijuana experience that we just happened, the weed that we just got. And we're like, man, somebody really we need to do this in Telluride. Somebody needs to do this in Telluride. Telluride was a pretty liberal weed town. When I first moved to Telluride, I moved from Chicago. And in Chicago, I used to buy weed, but you kind of just got what you got. It rarely had a name, where I lived in Chicago. It didn't really have a name. I didn't get to pick out what I wanted. But when I moved to Telluride, the weed scene was definitely different. I feel like the first time I went and bought weed in Telluride, it was we have strawberry cough, grape ape, rhino wreck, and I don't know. I don't want to guess, but there was one more. There was 4 because I got a quarter of each. And I was just blown away. And the quality was super high, super good. So anyways, yeah, we're at Fish. We're coming back. We're talking about, we definitely need to, get a weed shop going in Telluride. This is October 2009. It's probably end of the month kind of thing. Beginning of November. And so anyways, we get a group of people together at the time, and we get a medical marijuana license in the town of Telluride, which was a funny experience all of its own. You go into the town and you're like, hey, we would like a business license for a medical marijuana shop. And they're like, what? If we're like, yeah, well, we want a license for a medical marijuana shop. And they're like, well, what's that? And we're like, well, you see, the marijuana laws just changed in the state. And now, you can open a retail store. So you can sell marijuana. And what happens is there's also these people known as caregivers. And caregivers can grow plants for their customers. And so basically, we will fly a doctor in, help people get their medical marijuana cards, and they will sign us up to be their caregiver, and we will be able to grow and sell them marijuana. And the conversation went on a little further and a little back and forth. And anyways, we walked out of there with a license for a medical marijuana center, which was followed by a moratorium on medical marijuana licenses in Telluride. I think it was maybe 6 or 8 months or something like that before they took the moratorium off. But we were able to open because of that in December of 2009. And so we're like, all right, so it's like beginning of November or whatever at this time. And we're like, now we have a license, but we don't have any money. We don't really have a retail place yet. We're still looking and hunting around. And we're kind of like striking out on finding appropriate places that would be affordable. I remember finding some that were like in the town of Telluride, and then there was some outside of the town of Telluride. Then we ended up finding this one, which is the one that we're still at today. I feel like we all loved it so much because of its views. It's got like the best views in Telluride. If you guys have ever been to the shop, Alpine Wellness, you'll know what I'm talking about. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So it's hard to move out of there. It's not like directly on the sidewalk of Main Street. And so we take a little bit of a hit there, but there's kind of like something to be said about the view. And I don't know if I would have survived trapped in a box for the last 15 years, because with the cannabis industry, at least in Colorado, you can't be visible from the sidewalk. So if you have a cannabis store that's on the sidewalk, you have to have the windows blacked out or covered or whatever. And it kind of gives you this feeling like you're like locked in a basement all day. So we were on the second floor and we had this beautiful view of the Dallas Divide and Ajax and all that, and just like the Main Street view of Telluride, which is, if you haven't seen it, Google it. It's gorgeous. And so that's where we've called home for the last several years. I mean, the whole time, really. But we settled in there. A lot of people don't remember this, but, when it came to raising money at the beginning, we had a certain amount of like family friend type loans, smaller loans, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, kind of help us get going with startup inventory and all that stuff, security systems and safes and computers, lighting. I mean, we're like, how do we design this? And part of it has to be set up a little bit like an administrative office. Like we had like a, like almost like an administrative assistant, administrative manager. When you walked in and you like checked in, they handled all your paperwork. We kept it on file. It was pretty legit, like, and then, those people working did a ton for the business just because that was not my forte. It was none of our forte really, but you really had to be organized in that sense, filing cabinets, patient files, this application, that application, because patients would call in, they're like, hey, I want to get my medical marijuana card, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, you walk in kind of that. And so it took a little bit of startup capital to get it. It was, we definitely were like nickeling and diming. And I think the last haul for financing, which I always find funny, because I'm the one that really did this, but I don't know if you guys remember this, but there's back in the day, if you got like a credit card, it used to come with 3 convenience checks, they were called. And so it was like the credit card, and you had 3 things in there that looked like checks, and you could just write a check and it would post against the credit card. And back then my credit was pretty good. I wasn't established as a medical marijuana store. Now, like nowadays, I still can't get a credit card. 15 years later, I'm like flagged by the banks and the credit system and blah, blah, blah. So I get I apply for as many credit cards as I can. And each one of them that I got approved for comes and it has these convenience checks. And so we use these convenience checks to, finish buying inventory, finish, paying like first, last deposit of rent, And so immediately out the gate, just start out with like the worst form of debt that you could get. And so it wasn't all bad though. It was worth it. I would do it over again, but I thought that was kind of some, outlaw shit right there. I was like, just keep applying for these credit cards and writing these checks. I keep sending them. May as well. And so nobody else would give us money. So it was like, okay. All right. Whoops. So So after that, we had the place. We had some people. I mean, so many of our friends were just so excited to get involved. And they're like, no effing way you guys are running the dispensary. Like, no way. There was us and there was one other dispensary in Telluride. And that was LSMFT, legally supplied marijuana for Telluride. And then it was us, Alpine Wellness. And so, yeah, friends were stoked. Hype was high. People wanted to help. They wanted to see how they could get involved. Growers and people who had experience with the weed industry were just coming out of the weed work. And let me tell you something about growers. All of them grow the best weed. Am I right? I know. It's rhetorical. But yeah, so you get the store open. People are showing up. We're really not selling weed yet because you have to have people in town with medical marijuana cards before you can sell weed. So you almost have to have the doctor come in, do a big session, and fly them out. And that experience was so funny. I mean, it cost so much to fly a doctor to Telluride and then put him up in a hotel and then take him out to sushi and take him out to the Sheraton for steaks each night. But we were riding high. We were like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. We just flew this motherfucker into Telluride. We're going out to sushi. And just before that, we were at Fish, right? And so it really wasn't that much time. But we got home from Fish and we were like, whoa, this is how we do it. But so we start getting the doctor flying out. That opens kind of like a new chapter of the business itself, because now the residents of the town of Telluride are able to come in and get a medical marijuana card, which usually enabled you to grow 6 plants, and I think you could buy 2 ounces at that time of weed. And so then they get their card, they'd sign us up as their caregiver so we could grow those plants and sell that weed for them. The doctor would come in, we'd set him up in his own little room and, kind of decorate a little bit, make it look like doctor's office-y. We did our best. I think it looked good, And yeah, I don't remember. I think that doctor came in and just did. I mean, they raked it in, the doctors. I mean, it was like $200 an appointment, and each appointment was like 15 minutes, and we would just be booked solid the whole day. And so the doctor's making, $200 an appointment. We flew him in. We put him up in a hotel. We fed him, and I think we did that once a month for a while, And so there would be like this rhythm that we were building in the revenue, basically, just because every time the doctor came out, more people could shop. There were more customers. And so we're like, all right, we got to keep bringing the doctor in once a month. More and more people were calling, like, when's the next doctor appointment? When can I do this? When can I do that? And, our gal at the time, Kristen, was like, up at the front, manning the phones, manning the filing system, or womaning. I don't know if womaning is a term, but we can make it one. She was womaning the phone, womaning the filing system, getting everybody's stuff done. Like, a lot of people don't realize that, she whipped it together for them and in that early stage. And because I don't know that, I mean, we probably could have figured it out, but it probably wouldn't have been as nice as Kristen did it. So, and a lot of our Telluriders remember her, so shout out to Kristen. But yeah, I think by like December 15th, 2009, that was our first day of sales at the weed store. And you walked in, you checked in at the front desk, you came into the waiting room, and then at that time there was a couple different people that you may have sat down with. One of them was me. I'd be in the little back room. We had this like desk. It was like a little triangular room. Like, I don't even know if it was 15 square feet in that back room. But, you like sit down with me, and it almost felt like a little bit of a therapy session. You'd sit down, I'd be sitting there. I was probably rolling joints at the time, and I'd put the joints down, and I'd be like, yeah, so what's going on? And how are you doing? Like, I didn't know what to say. This is the first time, like, how do you invent this wheel? Like, what does this conversation sound like? And I think it kind of still is like our conversation today, to tell you the truth. I don't know that that's the case for all dispensaries, but I think we're like very personal at our shop. And, we have like a tight knit group in town. A lot of our tourists really like coming still because we remember them. We ask about them, and we have these real conversations. And I'm hoping to bring you some of those real conversations. We're going to hope to get a little recording studio set up at the Telluride store. So stay tuned for that, because that's going to be kind of cool. I got it kind of staging right now. So stay tuned for that. But, you sit down with me, I'm like, oh, how's your day? You're like, oh, man, it's been really rough at work. I'm super like blah, blah, blah. And I'm waiting for snow. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you, dude. I'm like working up at Bout Doctor still. And, we're kind of getting the store ready. And this whole conversation goes on. Sometimes it goes deep. Sometimes it stays superficial. Then we start talking about weed. And there's like, I don't know, 16 jars on the shelf. Something like that. All with like labels on them. Like this strain, that strain. And so I'm like, yeah, so what are you feeling like smoking? Like, you like sativas? You like indicas, hybrids? And people are usually like, I don't know, let me use my nose. A lot of people want to use their nose back in 2009. Because it really wasn't about indica, sativa, hybrid that much back then. It was a little bit. It definitely, back then, it was zero about THC percentage. And I feel like that's a really important thing to note about 2009, because they didn't require that we started testing for THC percentage. I don't know. I want to say that was like 2013 or something like that. You had to start testing the THC percentage. And then the THC percentage after that, you'll notice, became way more marketable, right? It started really to infiltrate the marketing of cannabis. And to tell you the truth, it doesn't really affect me either way. I feel like it's one of those things where if you don't care about the THC percentage and you're just like kind of smoking, I don't know if you really realize that, you just like take a puff and set it down. If you want another puff, you take another puff. But yeah, there was nobody was trying to figure out THC percentage back then. It just wasn't something that anybody knew. In fact, when labs first started coming out, we did send a strain in that I loved so much. Everybody loved. We could not keep it on the shelf. And it came back at 8%. And nowadays it's like everyone's looking for that 25, 30% shit. And it's like, I don't really know if it's all that important. Really, the name of the game is to feel good. Our friend Tim Leary said that way back in the day, and it's true. And so it's to feel good, so it's like, you're not necessarily, I got people who come into the store even today. They're like, you got something that will throw me over the edge? And I'm like, do you understand what that implies? You don't want to go over the edge. That's not the desired effect, I don't think. But whatever. Here's something that I hear throws people over the edge. Go for it. So anyway, so people come into the store, they sit down, they talk to me. Back then, there was no rules about smoking in there. We didn't smoke, but we did have a vaporizer. And so you can sample the weed. And so I was legitimately all day sitting there sampling weed with people with that one of those little Vapor Brothers vaporizers with the hose. Remember those? He's twist a little knob, put a little weed in there, and then you're we're like, oh yeah, that was pretty nice. Maybe can I try the lemon skunk real quick? And I'm like, oh yeah, man, you can try the lemon skunk if you want. And so that's kind of how it was. A little ridiculous, I know, but that's the truth. And a lot of you remember that kind of shit. You also probably remember, there was outside of the store back in 2009, right? There's caregivers, right? Those are just like our shop was a caregiver to people. There was individuals that were caregivers to people, and they can do the same thing. They could grow for people as patients that sign them up as their caregiver. So, if Mark, Luke, Cindy, and Paul signed Mike up to be their caregiver, then Mike has the legal rights to everything the doctor wrote them. So quantity of finished product and quantity of growing plants. And so the caregivers were also kind of like operating as a business. A lot of caregivers back then would sell cannabis to the dispensaries because they had too much and they grew too much and they needed to release the pressure a little bit. And so dispensaries were a place that they could sell their product and then we could resell it to patients. And so there was a little bit of a buy-sell game at first when it came to the relationship between caregivers and dispensaries. And to tell you the truth, it's really not that bad of an idea. I do think that at number one, I think caregivers need a license, okay? You probably should continue doing the testing, although I think some of the testing that we're doing on cannabis right now is not quantified in the right ways, like when it comes to THC percentage or mold content or mildew or parts per million or billion of a herbicide or a pesticide. I think it's really important to test, but I also think it's really important to know what the actual dangerous amount is. And I don't think in the state of Colorado they do. I think they just kind of made numbers up. And I don't know if it's based on any scientific research. And so that has proven to be problematic because, as you know, marijuana is organic material. And it's I could go to the grocery store right now and find you a bag of lettuce. You could do this too. I could find you a bag of lettuce that is rotten, and I could go walk my ass up to the cashier and buy that, right? So, and that's because you can't control nature that way. It happens. You have to know how to spot it. You have to have growers that care about the quality of their product. And if they're growers that don't care about the quality of their product, then they probably won't survive very long. And so that's kind of the way that the system will work itself out. But anyways, the caregivers were a big part at the beginning for getting the industry up and running. And one thing that they did, this was really funny. They used to make the edibles at the beginning, and boy, oh boy, this was nuts, man. Oof. I mean, I'll take a little drink break before I pop into this. And then I got this. This is a nicotine vaporizer. I don't recommend them, but I'm still trying to quit, so whatever. Well, that was gross. I hope you guys didn't see me drool. That's weird. That's very good. All right. So you have to imagine we're in Telluride, okay? And certain people are caregivers and certain people are patients. And these people work at places the ski shops and the hotels and Ace Hardware and the restaurants. And they're the Groms and the Bro Bras. They're the ski bums that moved to Telluride to ski. And so I would say 90% of those people were stoners. You moved to Telluride and it's a substantial amount of weed being smoked there. It was like a life-changing culture shift for me coming from Chicago, like legitimately. And so that is the kind of people I'm talking about. And they were great people, so don't get me wrong. Ski bums are some of the best people ever. I would like to think that I'm still one of them, but I haven't been able to go skiing in many years for multiple reasons. But I'm going to try and get my act together here again soon. So, but it is totally a lifestyle, totally an awesome jam. But yeah, these people, they're like, hey, so, I'm starting my own edible line, and it's, Johnny Apple Seeds, or one guy did pot tarts. They were like little fruit tarts. One guy did little pieces of chocolate, and they were fantastic. Like really, really, really well done chocolate. And some of these, like the chocolates were good. The chocolates were dosed correctly. The lemon bars, I remember getting the lemon bars, and it was like the guy came in. He's a caregiver. We check him in. We get his stuff. And he's like, yeah, so each lemon bar, which is like a square, like that big, like your normal lemon bar that mom makes at Christmas or whatever. He's like, each square has 1 gram of keef in it. Now, 1 gram of keef is like, the dust that comes off the plant. So it's like THC crystals that are just falling. It's like dry sift, basically. And so that, you got to figure that's probably like, I don't know, let's call it 700 milligrams in there, because maybe not all of the weight of that gram is THC, quote unquote. But still, like a lemon bar this big. He's like 1 gram of keef in each one. And we're like, whoa, that sounds fucking dope. Like we'll definitely take that. Then the next guy comes in, he's got pot tarts. The other guy comes in, he's got chocolates. We got crispy treats. We got cupcakes. We got cookies. We got all these caregivers coming in with stuff that they're making. And we're able to buy it. At first, there wasn't really many rules. Eventually, you couldn't really do it this way, which I do think it kind of stinks. Like, I think, if you can regulate it in an easy enough way, give people some standards to follow, I think it's a viable way for like your average citizen to maybe benefit from the cannabis industry. Like, it doesn't all have to be made in a factory by a corporation. Yes, we have to have rules. Those rules should be quantified against scientific results, as I was saying before. But I do think like when 2009 happened, there was the world of cannabis as we knew it back then, which had nothing to do with the industry. There was this subculture, right? You could buy weed since like 1960s or something like that, probably even before then. But like obviously something was going on. It was a trade. It was under the table. There were growers. There were people processing waxes and hash. And in 2009, all that whole subculture kind of got bulldozed. And I don't think we talk about that enough because they were doing something illegitimate at the time. But now, I do feel like finding a way for that group of people to be able to participate in the market again, I feel like that would be appropriate, and it would actually make our stores a lot more special. If we had locals who were following rules and regs and had an affordable way to get into the industry, blah, 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 if they could sell their specialty items to dispensaries, that's kind of a good way to make a living, and only the strong will survive, right? And so it's like, oh, well, what if people are just getting It's like, well, we're not going to buy product from people who are half-assing it, right? Am I right? Like, that's the whole thing. Like, we don't want to be over-regulated. Like, everyone needs some rules and some foundation, but otherwise, I don't want to carry shitty stuff at our store. I don't think anybody does. So, food for thought. But, I think bringing that consciousness back on the culture of cannabis that existed for decades before the cannabis industry. Before the guy that owns all those Teslas outside the dispensary bought like 5 stores. He has money. He wasn't really part of like weed industry back in the day. And weed industry back in the day is kind of cool. I like participated in it as a customer. I used to buy weed. But all these people are like really good people. These are the people the whole time that were saying like, hey, we should really legalize this because it's really beneficial to people and it's helpful. And it's not like other drugs. It's not like other drugs. It's not like drugs that are addictive and damaging. In fact, it actually helps people stay away from those other drugs. All in the meanwhile, we're being told back then that, cannabis is this big gateway drug and is bad for you. And like, this is your brain on drugs. Sizzling egg, right? Everybody remember that? But that's not true. None of that stuff was true, it turns out. I've been smoking weed for 15 years, right? My brain, I guess, I don't think it's like a fried egg, but it's definitely not as bad as they made it seem. And I don't think weed was ever a gateway drug. I think I typically view weed in the opposite sense. Like if I want to go out and drink, right? And I smoke a little bit of weed first, I might soon be looking for my sweatpants, I'm not going out to drink. Like I'm fine. I'm good. Or like maybe somebody that has like a drug problem, like with heroin or something like that. A lot of those people have found some refuge in weed because they needed a little something to like make their brain happy with the situation, and thank goodness it wasn't more heroin or more opiates or whatever it may be. And so, yeah, I think marijuana is actually like the opposite of what they taught us about it. Like, I don't think it's a gateway drug at all. I think it helps cool everybody out. And, it was back in 2009, you could find headlines right now. I mean, they were talking about reefer madness. They're like, this is going to cause so much crime and dismay, and the suburbs are going to fall apart, and our pets' heads are falling off. It's like news article, this is going to be terrible, And then after that, like I felt like they kept just searching and searching and searching for a story that would support their hypothesis that the cannabis industry would create a negative effect on society and increase crime and increase the amount that kids are using cannabis. And, people are going to be jumping off of buildings and stuff. It's like, what are you talking about? And years went on and like none of that stuff happened. And they kept looking. Like anytime something did happen, that was like the only marijuana news that made the news. I felt like it was like, oh, finally something negative happened. Let's make sure everybody knows we weren't wrong. But yeah, it wasn't very much stuff. I'm sure you guys all remember that. But they don't talk about how they were wrong about that. But I will. You guys were wrong about it being reefer madness and about kids using it more and blah, 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 blah. And the kid thing, like, I think, like, the age limit is fine on cannabis, but you all know that, like, the first time you smoked weed was probably in high school. That's when I first smoked weed. That's where you got it. It probably came from Mexico. I don't know. No idea. But that's where we tried it, right? Like, if we're being real with one another here, we tried it in high school and we, like, bought it off the black market. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, 2009 was an interesting time. I remember being so excited. The whole world was kind of shifting around me, and I couldn't believe I was like going from ski bum to selling weed for a living. I always thought the best job in Telluride in the future would be like once weed delivery services took off, which they have, but you still can't do this idea. But I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if like you could like have a backpack full of weed and like people could like text you their order and be all like, oh, all right, I'm on lift 12 and then I'll be like, okay, cool. I'll meet you up at lift 12 in a little bit. You just like ski around the mountain all day, meeting people on the lifts and handing off sacks. Like, how fun would that be? Just saying. I mean, it's kind of like the beer cart at the golf course, right? Kind of the same thing, except it would be me, not like some cool beer cart lady. But I feel like, after that, I think it was, December 15th through the 31st, and it was a new frontier ahead in 2010. I don't think any of us knew what we were about to go through. I don't think any of us knew how much it was going to cost. And I don't think we thought about that stuff. We were just really caught up in the excitement of it all. And I think that was a really good place for us to get caught up, because I think one thing that kept us going over the years was our naivety, was our lack of understanding of the road ahead. We didn't have time to think that this is a bad idea. We just were like, this is amazing. We live in Telluride, we're ski bums, we own a weed shop. Holy balls. Unbelievable. I can't believe this happened to us. And so, we wrap up 2009, 15 days after we opened, and cross over into 2010, which I'll have to tell you about next time when we do a little Break the Cypher storytelling. And I'd like to try and do this every so often so that it's not just the news that we're feeding you guys, because the news isn't all that important all the time. And I am going to talk about regulations a lot and taxes a lot and some news stories a lot, because it is important that you listen to those. We need to free the plant, okay? The way cannabis is being regulated and taxed is a false sense of legalization. Imagine a marijuana plant, just a beautiful marijuana plant that it says legalized marijuana 2024, the United States of America, something like that. And the weed plant is just bound and lying on the ground, wrapped in red regulation tape, and it says, keep out, hippies need not apply. That's where cannabis industry is going. Okay, cannabis industry is going to the wealthy, to the corporations, and to the government right now. So please stick with me on the other stories, and I will try and break our cipher and try and have a little fun every once in a while on some of these topics, because it is a really good story, and I hope you're interested in it. I got nothing but love for you. Thank you for joining me. Happy Veterans Day. Show your appreciation to our vets out there. Tell the government to start treating them a little better too. Speaking of, right? Okay. You guys have a good day. I'll talk to you soon.